Welcome to my channel. If it wasn't obvious enough, I am non-binary, and like many non-binary people, I came out at one point, actually multiple. And sometimes when you come out, you get some questions that are a little weird or awkward or about things that you haven't really thought about, and I was in that spot too. I got asked questions that I didn't really know how to answer, and they were used as a weapon against me to disprove my identity. Well, I came out over 2 years ago now, and ever since then I feel like I have thought about these questions a lot, and I have come to some sort of conclusions, answers, or I've just thought about it a bunch to be ready when someone asks me that question again. So that's what I'm kind of planning on doing. I want to present some questions that I've been told or I've heard, and maybe you've also been asked those questions, and I want to share the answers that I've come to, or just the experience that allows me now to answer those questions, because I know it is very hard to come out to anyone, and it is even harder to come out to someone and have them ask questions that are a little spicy or just plain uncomfortable. The kinds of questions I mean aren't really like, oh, what's in your pants? It's more like people that ask you questions to disprove your identity, basically transphobic or turfy questions. I hope that maybe it will give you an insight into the way that different people might think, or it might help you on your own journey of figuring out how to deal with people that are going to challenge your identity, because there is always going to be someone who is not going to believe you, and we just have to deal with that, I guess. Social media / trans friends made you think that you are trans. This is something that I was told personally. I was asked if I had any trans friends in real life, and at the time I did talk to a trans person. They were a friend of mine. We didn't really hang out that much. We did a little bit, but we didn't usually talk about trans stuff. But this person was used as a proof that someone else made me think that I was trans, because someone else convinced me that I was, and none of these feelings were actually mine. I just was convinced by someone else. I guess I wasn't really close or that close to this person, and while they were the kind of first spark that caused me to start questioning my gender, I didn't ask them to lead me on my quest of self-discovery. I mostly did that on my own. I did look at social media a lot, but I feel like it wasn't social media that convinced me that I was trans. It just gave me a way into figuring it out. There are so many great trans resources on the internet, and there are so many ways that you can figure out who you really are, and it just might take a while. Maybe you know exactly who you are already, and you just use the internet for like guides on how to, I don't know, dress a certain way, or be perceived a certain way. But for me, it was more, I took in all of this information and tried to figure out which applied to me, and that way I kind of figured out who I was or what identity I had. But it wasn't just through this social media. A lot of my personal discovery of my gender was trying on different clothes, going by different names and pronouns, just figuring out how I want to be perceived. And so social media was definitely a big help when I needed some outside ideas, but it wasn't the thing that convinced me to even start questioning my gender. But my trans friend was the one who actually told me that I could question my gender, but that was about it. They shared their own experience, and then I went off on my own, and sometimes we talked about it, but like very little. Like they told me what binders were and stuff like that, but I didn't get my first binder until a year after that, so I had a long time to think about whether a binder was actually something that I wanted. You're not trans, you just hate your body. Well, first of all, gender dysphoria is not hating your body. That's not what it is. I can't speak for other people, but for me, gender dysphoria is much more of a disconnect. It's a feeling of being uncomfortable more than hating my body. I've never hated anything about my body. There are parts of my body that make me feel a little uncomfortable, and I prefer to hide them or anything, but I don't outright hate them. And I've heard other people say this too. They don't hate their body, they may just be uncomfortable with parts of it, or might feel like these parts don't belong on their body, but that doesn't mean that they hate it. Some people may have problems with body image. They might think because of the way that society kind of pushes being thin and pretty, they might hate their body for those reasons, but I think it's very different for a trans person and for a person with body image issues. I don't look in the mirror and hate everything that I see. I just see parts of it that make me a little uncomfortable, and the way I can basically fix it is just put on a binder. For me, definitely, when I put on a binder, it just takes away this, even subconscious sometimes, feeling of being uncomfortable, and it just makes me happier. I don't hate the fact that I have certain body parts. I feel like they don't fit there. You think hormones will solve all of your problems? No. I don't know where this comes from because I've seen this debunked more than actually being talked about. I've heard people talk about going on hormones and it drastically changing their life for the better, but no one ever says that hormones will actually immediately make everything better. And for me personally, I'm still not entirely sure if I even want to go on testosterone. I don't even know if that's something that I want to do, and I'm keeping that as an open option, but I'm clearly not trying to get testosterone as an end goal and then everything will be fixed. There are so many ways that I have made myself more comfortable in this world without testosterone that I think it's absurd when someone says something like this, because it's just blatantly not true, and most trans people are very aware of that. We know that it's not a fix-all. We know that hormones aren't going to make our mental illnesses go away. We just hope that it might change some of the things that we don't have control over. But you didn't show any signs as a kid. Not everyone shows signs of being trans when they're a kid. Gender is such a complicated issue, and even adult trans people can be very different from each other. So, of course, the same thing is going to be true for when you're a kid. Gender is also something so abstract that I personally don't remember thinking about gender almost at all when I was a kid. I just went with whatever I was told and didn't really think about it in any other way because that's how it was. You were assigned a thing and that's what you went with, and that's it. I have memories of being disconnected from different things that were labeled as for girls when I was small, but I didn't see that as something that, oh, something, I am trans now. Well, first of all, I didn't even know what being trans was, but I was like, well, maybe that's just normal for people. And there are so many things that many times parents overlook that are possibly signs of being trans, but it's just, you know, kids preferring to play with different dolls. Like, you can just think, well, they're a kid. They don't care. They just want to play with the doll that they want to play with. And then parents wave this off as nothing, while it might be a sign of being trans. Or these signs might be actively stopped by parents and then corrected. And then the child will stop showing those signs. And yeah, then of course you're not going to see any signs when you're punishing your child for showing signs of being trans or playing with toys of the opposite gender or wearing clothes of the opposite gender or just, you know. And for me as a non-binary person, if my gender identity was ever manifested somehow when I was a kid, it wouldn't be that obvious because I just sit somewhere in the middle of the gender spectrum. My signs of being trans wouldn't probably be as obvious because I'm not binary trans. And so the signs would be probably very different or weak or something that the parents just wave off as me being weird rather than actual signs of gender identity stuff. And again, as I said, not everyone has to show any signs. Gender identity is so complicated even for adults that it wouldn't surprised me that it confused a lot of us trans kids at the time, and we just didn't think about it much or just actively ignored it because it was too much or too incomprehensible or just too abstract. I know many just queer kids in general felt like they were out of place during their childhood, but maybe they didn't quite figure it out until they became adults and went out and experienced the world and society from a different perspective. It's similar to gay people. Not every gay man is going to be a sissy boy when he's a child, and that's just stereotypes and it's not entirely accurate. But you're so feminine. Being feminine or masculine or any other adjective that is related to gender expression doesn't change anything about your gender identity. I feel like personally I am quite a feminine person, but that doesn't change the fact that I am non-binary. I feel like this has been said many, many times before, but gender identity and gender expression are two different things, and while gender expression may be influenced by gender identity, gender expression doesn't usually dictate what gender identity is. You can prefer to present more femininely because your identity is more on the feminine side, but you can also have your identity be feminine and your gender expression be completely different. Gender identity and gender expression are often connected, but they don't necessarily have to correspond 100%. Just in general, let people look however they want. Just be nice. Your parents know you better than you know yourself. Absolutely not. You know yourself the best. If you want to get outside perspectives or advice, your parents might be a great source of that. If you're close to them and if they know a lot about you, they might be very helpful in your quest of finding out your gender identity or anything else that you're questioning, really. But don't let yourself be convinced when someone says that your parents know you better than you know yourself. Yes, they did watch you grow up, but they don't see inside of your head. They don't feel the feelings that you do. They don't think the thoughts that you do. They will never know exactly what you have in your head or in your heart. Think of all the secrets that you're keeping from them, all the little things that they will never know about, and only you know about them. And so only you can decide what is the actual best thing for you. Like I said again, that doesn't mean that you shouldn't listen to your parents ever. If they want to help you and give you advice, maybe listen to them. But, you know, some parents are not always entirely supportive. So, this was some of the knowledge I have collected over multiple years of questioning my gender identity and being met with some interesting remarks when talking about it. Most of these come from my own experience, my own research, and going around the world. You might have a different experience or a different way to answer these questions. But yeah, I just thought that it would be nice to share this to anyone that might need to hear it or might just want to hear, someone who is a little further along in the journey, which I'm probably not that much further. I hope it helped someone out there. If you have any questions or want to talk about anything trans or queer related to me, my DMs are open. You can DM me on Twitter and you can DM me on Instagram, where I'm not always on Instagram, so Twitter is probably better. I will always be happy to help any trans kids or adults out there. Sometimes it's hard to be in our position, but it gets better. I know it's a little cliche to say that, but I've been in situations that didn't look that great, and now I'm doing pretty good. So it does get better, and have a nice day.